All right. Well, you don't have a people problem. You have a system problem that's showing up as a people problem. That's what we're going to get in today and unpack with guest Joel Schwan, founder of Schwan Stratifyr, who's really helping business leaders fix their workforce chaos and really one practical process at a time. I'm your host, David Carr of Steward Your Business. I'm really glad to have you here at the Business Roundtable podcast. We've got a great topic we're going to dive into today. I help align people, processes, and purpose so that we are actually bringing clarity and confidence and really creating that consistency in your organization. And that's why I wanted to have Joel on here today, because of what he does in workforce strategy, helping you with both at the enterprise level and entrepreneurial worlds, working from you've worked, Joel, I know, with Microsoft and Uber and Google, all these big companies, but really help them streamline and their hiring, onboarding, and retaining their top talent. So I want to say thank you for being here, Joel, and sharing your wisdom with our listeners today.
And David, thanks for having me here too.
Yes. Definitely.
So,
Well, your journey really resonates, I feel like, with a lot of our listeners, Joel, that they've experienced a shift, that they're shifting from reacting to being intentional. And that's what we want to help you have on the podcast today, just help them continue that journey of being more intentional, how they're showing up, how they're running their companies, how they're managing their people. The most important aspect, that's my company, Steward Your Business, stewarding your people. So you have worked with Fortune level environments, and now you're guiding growing businesses. I want to ask you, what was the moment you realized you needed to launch Schwan Stratifyr and start to lead differently yourself? Talk a little bit about us. Give a little about your journey as an entrepreneur and founder.
yeah, so I started Schwan Stratifyr back in 2023, right after I was laid off myself, and I had spent over 15 years managing teams in retail and then 10 years additional working in workforce operations as HR, recruiting, and as a contingent workforce consultant. And I kept seeing like the same. I was reflecting a lot, after you get laid off, as one tends
Yep.
to do. Uh, and I
Yep.
used to see like a lot of the same patterns everywhere. It's like, companies would spend like months hiring someone great and then lose them in like the first 90 days because the onboarding or communication process was kind of broken.
Yep.
And so that was kind of a turning point for me where, I was realizing it wasn't the people that were failing, but it was the process. And I think a lot of people now, right, that are job searching are understanding that that process might not be as great as we all thought it was, or maybe more broken than we thought it was, I guess.
Yep.
But most like small to medium sized businesses like don't need more people. What they really need is like a better understanding, or a better word, clarity, I guess. Once I started helping owners fix that, that results, helping them fix their process, the results kind of came. So I think that's something that a lot of companies kind of need to kind of look at nowadays is like they definitely need to look at the process a bit more, but not just in the regards of like adding more AI onto things, which I can touch on that later too.
Sure.
But also like you're you're growing and you need your workforce to be there with you. And we shouldn't be looking at things as the automation as a means to like replace the workers, but how to enhance them.
Yes.
That's where my book kind of really goes into is like, how do you enhance your workers as you scale with your business?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you and I are on the same wavelength on that. We've talked about that on previous episodes, actually. If you guys missed them, we have a couple different conversations on that specifically in different aspects. But I think, I love that you're bringing this up. How do we do this? And I think some people are doing things out of like survival and not strategy. And what I hear you saying is, let's look at this strategically. How do we do this? And not just kind of just grabbing at things, right? Just like, oh, there's this, there's that. I mean, oh, the AI will solve the problem. Like, well, hold on, you guys you're this. I love where you come at this as a strategist. You're looking at this, helping them plan for the future. Because I know I've worked with a lot of leaders in helping them in this space too, Joel, because if they're doing this well, it's great. The team will thrive. But if you said otherwise, everybody's really breaking down. And it's like throwing people at the problem in and of it is not going to solve it, right? I'm sure that you're just adding actually more problems to the situation. You haven't resolved the other issues that are on there, right?
Yeah, it's like you got to ask yourself some serious questions too. It's like, a lot of people think like hiring, for example, hiring takes too long and onboarding might be a little inconsistent. That's what they assume is like their hiring process obviously is like not as well as ironed out as they think it is. But it's not just one thing either. It's all kind of like a misalignment on a lot of different factors. And that's kind of where like I recommend businesses kind of like do themselves like a self audit for themselves,
Yep.
or have someone like me come in and do the audit for them for their workforce. And what that basically is, sorry, I have a fly around here, which looks at like 5 areas, which is like role clarity, workflow mapping, capacity, governance, and metrics. And it's like, what's being measured, if anything.
Yep.
Role clarity as far as like, are we even hiring roles for the strategy, and the mapping is like, where's the delay? Is it hiring? Is it HR? Is it hiring managers? Is it the approval workflows? Is it just getting the offers out or following up with the candidates? Where all the bottlenecks are, and it's usually like a combination of things versus like just one thing. It's not just a matter of like,
Is there, I was going to ask you, Joel, to that point. Yeah. When you walk into a business that's struggling to grow, I was going to say, is there one thing that you notice, or is it like a combination of things? Like one is more than the other? Or, I mean, I'm just curious, like, what is it you typically see? Yeah.
Usually it's a combination of things. A lot of times it's like a miscommunication between like HR and like the procurement teams, depending on how big the company is. Sometimes it's just like the owner of the business just trying to be everything, including HR. And it kind of, that in itself can be a problem, leading to like just not being able to run the business correctly. And so, it's usually a combination of different things. Sometimes it comes down to like that they just don't understand this tool that they're using, if they're using a tool. Sometimes that their communication with their employees is a little rough, so they don't quite understand how they should be translating things for them when it comes to like business decisions. And of course, like the biggest thing I notice is like just not being able to either train them correctly or provide the right documents for them to learn on their own. And when a new employee, especially for like a smaller sized business, when they're brought on, sometimes they're just given like the rundown as far as what we're doing. Here's the project I need you on, start running with it, instead of like, here's the handbook, here's what we're trying to aim to achieve at our company. This is the project that we're working on. And if you have questions, these are the resource links here, if they have a database, or here's the handbook that will explain everything for you, things like that. It's like very simple things that kind of get overlooked very easily, especially in like smaller environments, because they just want to get, the owner just want to get things moving along. The project manager probably just wants to get things moving along. And so the whole human aspect of, trying to get to know your new hire kind of falls to the wayside sometimes.
Yeah, isn't it? It's interesting you say that, Joel, because I think I like to say, this is where your leadership habits show up. If your business is kind of a mirror of how you lead. So there's maybe, like you said, chaotic, not intentional. You're kind of like, and I find that this is common in a lot of areas. I was talking to another colleague this morning about like, I don't have, like you said, I don't have time to strategize. I'm like, it's quite the opposite. You need more time in strategy because that's going to actually help you at the bottom line at the end of the day. But sometimes there's counter to it. Like, I just got to get the work done. Like you're saying, I got to get this done. I'm like, well, hold on, slow down. Are you doing the right work, or is it making sense what even you're doing? I mean, have you ever seen my people hiring too many people? Like, now I got too many people to do this. I didn't think of the strategy. Like, how is going to divvy the work up? What would the schedule going to look like? Are they full-time, part-time? These different issues come up, Joel, where they're like, oh, now what do I do?
Yeah, it definitely comes up quite often, where they're like, either they think that, for example, they want full-time people, when in fact they probably could just use a contractor to come on and help out, either hourly or like on a set SOW project deliverables, or whatever the case is. Because sometimes it's something that could be done very quickly, or if it's going to take like only like maybe like 3 to 6 months or so. I always recommend doing contractors to have them come on, help them out, either like a W-2 contractor where they're hourly, or it's going to be a more complicated project. I do recommend statement of works then if there's like specific deliverables that you need. But if it's a short-term thing, you don't need a permanent employee to come on and do that, because then, once a permanent employee comes on, you're kind of stuck with them. And so, and then that's going to lead to like later problems like layoffs, like, oh, we have an abundance of workers now that we can't afford.
Right.
Well, that's going to make everyone's life miserable at the end, at a certain quarters. So I always recommend that, you really need to analyze what it is, because again, it comes down to misalignment. It's like you don't have a clarity on the roles, and therefore you don't have a good understanding of what the workloads are going to look like. So being able to plan that out and have like an actual route and game plan set up. So it's like, example, like you have a product that you're trying to build out, but you're not going to need a bunch of people to stay on afterwards. Having contractors come on and do that. Because one, they know that they're only going to be there for a short time, so it's not going to come as a shock to them if they're not brought on permanently. And two, it's going to save you money. I mean, you're going to save. You'll probably spend a lot less on bringing on a contractor versus having a permanent employee, and then having to worry about the benefits and all that stuff, which again, the costs. So, and usually when contractors are brought on, you're engaging with a supplier, and that they're the one. A lot of people have a misunderstanding that contractors actually get their benefits mostly through the supplying agency. So that will save the client company money in the long run. So they bring them out for a short period of time for a project, move them along, and that's going to save them money in the long run. So having a good understanding of the role clarity, like I mentioned earlier, what do we need them for, what capacity, and how long do we need them, is going to all kind of goes into the whole workforce planning aspect of things.
Yeah, no, that's the way you're breaking that down is really powerful, Joel. And so when you're working with a client, I want to break this down a little bit. The fix is your fix, and your audit of them is you're looking at like, what does that mix need to be of contractors, part-time, full-time folks, and and so where do you see companies where they struggle with that? And where do you see the companies that can really be positioned well, like, so that when you come in, Joel, you can really fine tune it? So how can companies, like, I want to have kind of two-pronged. If companies are doing things well, like, what are they doing so that you're like, okay, I can dial this in very easily. I can help you, figure out what that looks like, versus the companies that are not doing it well. I mean, obviously maybe obvious, but I think it's still, I want to contrast, like, so those that are listening can have a kind of reflect back. Am I moving in the right direction, or am I moving in the wrong direction? Like, what does that look like for you, Joel? When you're
so companies that are doing it well are the ones that are like doing like a skill alignment. They understand like the percentage of the workforce whose current skills are matching the roles that are required. Either they're doing it on their own, or they have outside people like me come in and help them out understand how to do it. My job actually is helping them self-sustain themselves, because I don't want to actually stick with a company for too long. I come in and I help them
get a set up, right? Like,
I'm the teacher. I come in and teach them how to do it, and then I move on to the next client. And so, and that's kind of what, one of the big things about me compared to others, because a lot of consultants want to kind of keep on their clients for like as long as they possibly can. I'm really just there to do the dirty work for you and get it figured out. And so the companies that I see it doing the best are like the ones that do the skill assessment or skill alignment, but also understand their capacity balance too, like workload versus staffing levels. Neither chronic overtime nor idle time. Those terms. The ones that aren't doing as well probably are like the ones sinking in the workflow or the workloads. That there's just too much going on, and then so that like I mentioned before, like for example, like a decision maker of a smaller sized business wearing all the hats, he's burning himself out. That's where coaches kind of come in to kind of how do you leave it? Oh, you got to delegate stuff. Well, it's hard to delegate stuff when you have no one to delegate stuff to, or everyone that you have to delegate stuff to is already overloaded, and they're going to deal with the burnout. And so being able to understand the capacity and knowing there needs to be a balance. A lot of companies don't understand that, and that's why a lot of layoffs kind of happen too, especially in larger companies, is that they don't understand the balance part of things. And so that's you might have to look into like additional roles or temporary roles, like I mentioned, where staff can kind of help each other out too. Having mentor programs from the get-go would be very helpful. That way, like project managers or managers of any type of team are actually like able to kind of help out their workers and give them guidance as to here's the resources that we have. Oh, you didn't know we had like a spreadsheet thing for this? Oh, it's right over here. A lot of things I wish when I joined when I joined in staffing in the first place, like I wish some of these things are what I map out for that I wish I have had. And so, having all that stuff, and a lot of companies don't either. They have it and they just think that it's just like in the background, and they think that the workers will find it. Doesn't always work that way.
No,
I know I get tired of trying to look through learn everyone's new database when I'm working with clients. So of course your workers are probably getting tired of trying to figure out the database themselves. And so that's what managers, teaching managers how to do that and engage with their workers when they're brought on, showing them where the stuff is. That's going to help decrease their stress levels considerably, especially if there's templates they could be using to make their job easier.
Right.
And then two, it's like I mentioned, the workload capacity, having like temporary people kind of come in and help out at other teams. So cross-functional, that's actually something that is actually been practiced for like since the 90s, but it's becoming more essential now because, with all the mass layoffs happening, we're thinking AI, or I think the companies are thinking that AI will take off all the heavy stuff. Well, it'll take care of the administrative stuff for sure.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like human interactions and having to work with clients face to face, that piles up, especially if you're on meeting after meeting, engaging with the client for the company to make sure that they're satisfied. That can build up. And so having someone to kind of like come in and take up some of the workload as needed, maybe attend the meetings or take the notes or address the notes that were taken during the meetings to make sure the work is getting done, will help out immensely, in my personal opinion.
Oh yeah, no, you brought up a number of items I want to follow up with you on. As you were talking, what came to mind earlier in the conversation, you were talking about like capacity, and that made me think of for those of that you don't know the famous Stephen Covey book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about the P/PC balance, like production versus production capability. And like what you're saying, Joel, is like sometimes we're just pushing so hard on production. You're like, but we don't have the capacity, the ability is not there. And I agree with you. The cross functionality is very important. I was curious to ask. So I worked at a very, very large engineering firm at one point. And it was like 40,000 employees, a lot large. But what I thought was surprising to me was there was not a clear understanding of the workforce and all the different skills and abilities they had. So what happened is then you just would be at a local office and we're just going to use these people, and some people would be overly utilized, where other people were underutilized within the overall company. So there was not a good visual to say, okay, what is the workforce that I have out there? Number one, and how have we quantified and broken down all the different skills and what they can actually do? Because they might be a primary role, like you said, Joel, and they say, well, right now we don't have a lot of that work. However, we got a lot of this, and I'm looking at your skill set, and you know what? That makes the mark. That could actually help me here. How do you help businesses kind of get that stuff set up, Joel? Because I think some of them, they're just blind to it. I mean, they have some idea, and somebody that's been around with the company for a long time might know this. Like, oh, I know so and so. Joe in this office to totally do that because they've been around, they know that. But if you're not fortunate to have that person that knows all these different people, you're kind of like, I don't know, I guess we just hire another person, or do we get a subcontractor? Or, you know what I mean? It starts to get messy, right, Joel?
Yeah, it definitely it gets very messy. Personally, what I what I do when I'm working with a client and trying to figure out the problem is, one, I have a communication with them, and I'll do a workforce audit, which covers all the things I mentioned previously. I actually have built a tool, which I'm happy to share with any of our listeners if they want to learn to see if their organization is workforce healthy or if they need to help grow. But what it is, like, it measures against like those 5 things I mentioned, but the app itself goes a little bit deeper with the questioning. But first, I kind of apply those same questions when I'm working with clients too, directly when I'm asking their departments, as far as like, who's communicating with who, what technologies are you guys using, for example, bringing someone on, and then what are you using them for, like the HRIS. How are they getting their credentials through the HRIS, or are they using a different tool altogether to get their credentials? Is that being emailed? Are they getting welcome emails? It goes down to a huge rabbit hole on a lot of things. But to keep it short and simple for this, I look at what their workflows look like, and then based on the conversations I've had with the different departments, I provide like an assessment at the end to kind of showcase, here's what I'm seeing, here's what your current state looks like, and then here's what a future state might look like that's a little bit better, that's more simplified. And my motto has always been to simplify a process versus try and overcomplicate it. And a lot of times it's like just one person needs approval from someone else, and it goes over to communicate to someone else, and then back around again. And so sometimes having it go more linear from like one side to the other versus up and down, left and right, I think works out much better as far as a model goes for your hiring and onboarding and getting people prepared to join your workforce. Of course, approvals still need to be done, but if you do it in a line versus having to guess or figure out where that approval needs to come from, or in certain situations, it kind of boils down to it also boils down to industry too. I should clarify on that too. Is sometimes in some industries are a little bit different, like manufacturing versus retail are very opposite in a lot of things, but very similar in similar things too, right? So, and then same thing with like the game industry, which I've had experience with working for like the Xbox studios in the past, is that they are quick to bring on contractors in a lot of ways, but being able to engage with them and also provide the information that they need to get start the developing of a game are a little bit different too. So being able to understand the work capacities, like I've mentioned a few times now, and then being able to understand how is that all that being distributed, and then also success planning, I think, is very important too. And I think you kind of mentioned that with if someone leaves, what happens?
And
absolutely. A lot of companies don't have that in place, and at least not in any of the ones I've ever worked at. I mean, there's people that can run as backup for a short time, but there's no one that can be like, okay, are we training this person to maybe one day help out, fill this role, and then this role will be filling the next role, and so on and so forth. So having a success plan and then actually acting on it is something I stress to clients too, to make sure it's like, do you have people that can run if you lose a cog in your system here, right?
That's so important. They don't think about that. They just think it'll just keep running, right? I think they're just kind of like, they're not being that's being reactive, right? I actually had Joel. I mentioned this when we talked previously, but I have a good friend of mine who's president of a company. He was telling me, had a great person that knew all this particular piece of equipment. And unfortunately, he got caught up in one of the ICE raids, if you will, or whatever the case may be. He's not. He has some immigration status issues. Let's just put it that way. Whether he's, I don't know the totals, but this person was the only person trained up on this piece of equipment, understood it, and the company is now struggling to figure out, like, we just can't throw somebody out there tomorrow on this thing. It's going to take time to train somebody. And I think sometimes, to your point, Joel, what I found is the companies that are being intentional about this and taking the extra time, like you're saying, and with your help, saying, you really need to train up somebody. Maybe they're not going to be there tomorrow, but hey, if this person wants get sick, they want to take a vacation. Could they do most of the work, like 80% and 85%? Could we get most of the way there so we're not completely like down on, so you're looking at those things, right, Joel? You're looking at those key positions and places in the organization and saying, okay, that's a problem. There's no duplicity here. And that's what I love working with companies. Like, so when you're doing this work, I love working with those kind of business owners that say, okay, what does it look like to follow what Joel's recommendations are, and how do we develop and mentor these folks, and how do I show up as a leader? Because I think this is what I found, Joel, is if I'm not the healthy leader, doesn't matter how great the workforce planning is and all these other things, is like, I'm not going to be able to affect it. Nobody's going to follow me. They're not going to learn from me. They're like, screw it. And so then your company is like, we're kind of back at the square one again. So it's like so important to tie these things together. And I know you do some of this stuff as well, but that's why I wanted to have it on the podcast, because I want to hear people to listen, do this strategy and do this assessment. And by the way, those of you listening, Joel and I are connected on LinkedIn, and we'll put his resources in the show notes. So please follow up there and leave any comments you guys have too. Comments or questions. We always like your feedback on these episodes. So, I think that the work you're doing is so important, Joel.
Yeah. And one thing I like to make sure my clients are aware is that I treat workforce planning as like a AA meeting. The first step is you have to admit you have a problem. And so, it's that, because, I can give you the best plan, like you mentioned, I can give you the best planning and the best strategies, the best model to work with, but it means absolutely nothing if you're not ready for it or not willing to accept it. And I think that's kind of the key thing that I look for in my clients, is that, are you ready to do it? I don't harass them with sales pitches. I don't, bother them harassing them saying, here's my cool thing that I got going on that's worked for so many other companies. I tell them what I've done, but I also need to know, and a confirmation from them saying, it's like, we have a problem. This is what we're seeing. And then we need someone to come and help us out. And then that's where I will step up and showcase all the cool things that I've done for others and what they can do and what will work best for them. Because it's not a one size fits all either. And anyone that tells you that, I don't think should be working in workforce planning, to be honest.
Right. Because there's so many different tools and industries, like you said, different needs.
One thing I really I think one thing that really I should stress, though, is that, and I call it the Constellation Design, is that instead of seeing talent as like a pipeline, we have to see it as an ecosystem, like employees, staff aug, independent contractors, statement of work partners, freelancers, et cetera, et cetera. Even AI and automation. They're all interconnected through skills, data, and and they all kind of like function as one tool. So that is something that I think it's kind of like especially when a lot of companies are kind of leaning more toward like skill-based hiring now. Kind of like following that Constellation Design I just talked about, and seeing them as more of an ecosystem versus a pipeline. I think is going to help companies a lot down the road, especially.
I like that Constellation. You're hitting my biology background, Joel, from ecosystem. But that triggered me to think, actually, as you said that, is what is your ecosystem? What is the culture? What does that look like for you? Because again, one size doesn't fit all. If one company, and I've seen this go. I'm curious to get your feedback on this. We're in this. I think still this. We're 5 years past COVID now, but we're still, I feel like, in this interesting time frame where there's like, everybody come back to the office, or no, we only want them to be hybrid, or what does this look like? What does this ecosystem look like? And how, again, what's that culture look like? Because some people want to work, they want to have flexibility, and sometimes there is flexibility, sometimes there isn't. It depends on, again, the industry. Where do we need to have people? If you're a retail store, you got to have people in the store, you just can't, but if you're online only, then maybe that's different, your support could be different. Can you speak a little bit to that? Are companies thinking about that more strategically, or is it just kind of happenstance and we're just like, well, I guess we kind of do this? It's kind of patched together. What are you seeing, Joel?
I say larger companies are definitely looking at that and understanding that they need to act more. Smaller companies, medium size, are kind of still figuring it out, because they're not experienced unless the owner comes from like a background of like the larger size company stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely things that need to be addressed that I don't see are really happening across the board are like leadership development. They talk a good game about it, and everyone kind of points to like their mission statement a lot,
Yeah.
but there's very little like leadership development program stuff being built for like potential managers, which
Mm-hmm.
kind of leads into the whole success planning thing too. It's like, are they
Mm-hmm.
succession ready?
Yep.
Are people being trained, like the cross-functional training and performance enablement? Performance enablement is something I really think needs to be addressed more in companies, at least
Mm-hmm.
spoken about,
Yes.
because that relates to psychological safety.
Yep.
And now I have a I have a master's degree in IO psychology.
Don't
So,
undersell yourself.
I'm going backwards in time here,
Yeah.
but that's that's something that's always like stuck out to me is that performance enablement. We treat like, for example, PIPs
Yep.
as a means to like get someone ready to get moved out of the company versus
Mm-hmm.
actually trying to teach them stuff. Now, there are some managers that treat PIPs that the way they're supposed to be treated, like actually helping your employees. But
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of cases, and this is more unique to like smaller type companies too, and large and super large ones like Microsoft, where they do a PIP as more of a courtesy, and then it's more to like now they're already planning to look for someone else, which
Yeah.
is going to cost the company even more money. And I think it's
Yep.
a super wrong way of doing it. So being able to look into performance enablement and provide the tools and processes for employees to succeed, and then
Yep.
manager training to equip those managers to support and coach the new hires effectively, kind of like all works together. And that all kind of goes back to the ongoing training stuff too of, implement micro learning.
Mm-hmm.
I also like doing blended learning too,
Yep.
where you kind of like teach them different ways of teaching them
Mm-hmm.
things, either like in meetings or in like actual interactive modules, and then personal development plans, being able to establish those and tailor them to the individuals and
Mm-hmm.
that can help the organization, because bottom line, it's all about helping the company. But
Yep.
if you help your individual cogs work better, then those cogs are going to one day support and move up into more serious roles.
Mm-hmm.
One, I hope I'm not offending anyone by calling them cogs, but it's the only analogy I can think of right now. But
Yeah.
it's being able to grease those wheels and get them moving in the way they want them to, which will help them move them up in the organization. And granted, loyalty isn't as what it used to be, I think, or at least our perception of it. Company
Mm-hmm.
loyalty isn't what it used to be, but it's like if you're investing in your employees, even if they leave, they're going to remember you, and they're going to
Yeah.
recommend people to either can buy your products or come work for you. And
Yep.
then that kind of helps you build a pipeline right there by guaranteeing that they have a great experience and they left and
Mm-hmm.
they knew more than what they did when before they got there, and you treated them like your own children. Like, we all know about we're a
Yeah.
family here, so
Yeah.
that's for if you actually mean by those words, then those people are more likely to recommend your products. They're going to keep buying your products because
Mm-hmm.
workers are your consumers as well, and
Mm-hmm.
then they're going to send people back to you. And especially if your recruiters reach out to them again and be like, hey, you might be interested in this role, and they'll be like, no, but here's a couple of good people I know, and refer them to you. And
Yes.
I think that right there kind of is like, payback and being able to help them out. And so you invest in them, they'll be more likely to invest in you. And not to keep talking, but there is I think I just thought about too. I was on a podcast previously where we were talking about this, and a workers actually, there was a company, I forget the name of the company, but what they were basically were going to do like layoffs, and they were making announcements about it because they just didn't have the money to sustain the workforce anymore. Or they were hitting a low. This is like during COVID time, and so
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have the budget. But the workers kind of rallied behind the company and were like,
Yep.
"We'll take a pay cut."
Yeah.
All across the board, they all
Mm-hmm.
were willing to take a pay cut, and I think that speaks volumes to the company on what their
Yep.
mission statement was and how the people actually believed in it. and to
Yep.
get workers willing to cut their money during a time where it was like almost impossible to,
Yeah.
where a lot of places were just kind of like shut down, I think speaks volumes,
Oh yeah,
especially
absolutely,
for you as
Joel.
a business. Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
goes. Yeah, I think I remember hearing a similar story along those lines, and um, I agree with you. We want. I think you and I are both wanting to help. Get those folks out. The companies that I call a leadership debt, where there's a compound effect of not developing people, not delegating effectively, avoiding hard conversations. That's where my passion at Steward Your Business is focusing on those leaders, helping them develop themselves, whether it's the individual themselves, oftentimes, or it's within the company. I love to do either way. It just depends on where I'm coming at it. But to your point, Joel, your work is going to be so much more effective. What you're doing from workforce scaling and getting it is if you have people, like you said earlier, that are in this process of developing themselves. They're in this process of becoming healthier. And this isn't a one-time fix. This is an ongoing journey, because at least for my capacity of like what I'm doing, like you said, the capacity or capability at one point in my career is going to change over time. And so it's not like, oh, this is it. It's like it's ongoing. But I think having a good roadmap, what you're saying, Joel, and helping them looking where they're going to have challenges in their workforce, getting these things set up, knowing the ecosystem, knowing the people that have the right skills, making sure that they have an amazing experience when they get onboarded, they find the right resources, like you said. And they're not, this isn't, it's being intentional, and that is going to pay dividends a long way down the line. And I'm excited for folks to be able to take this assessment and this tool that I know you're building, this app and other resources. And I know we're getting into the podcast, so we'll have to have you come back. But as we've gone and covered a lot of things today, and we haven't get too far into AI, but I think you and I both agree AI is a tool, but it's not necessarily a silver bullet. So don't just think, oh, I'm just going to do AI and that's going to solve my problem. No, you still need people. You still need people like Joel to come and help break down, ask you these questions. But if I'm listening, if I'm the business owner, or I'm, a person in charge of, hey, we're recording this in an early part of November 2025. Like, I'm going to be planning for next year, or I got to figure out what the hiring is, or how I'm going to compensate people, or what does that look like? What should they start doing first? What can they start to be proactive, Joel, in your words, so that they can, be prepared if they're going to maybe come and hire somebody like you, meet you. But if, they can just be more, at least problem aware, and then start to make some moves in the right direction.
Yeah. So, being able to understand what your turnover, do you have turnover stability? Of course, or does it seem like it's taking longer for your new hires to get onboarded? Are you seeing that a lot of complaints going on inside your company? I think that's like one of the biggest things too, is being able to understand the communication and conversations that are happening. And I
Yes.
don't mean like go, spy on them, or
Yeah.
send out, send out someone undercover, like an undercover boss. But I do think being able to be aware that is your culture. Do you feel your culture is psychologically safe? And that's a big thing that I think a lot of companies kind of overlook, because they assume their culture is hunky dory, because they're making money. But just because you're making money and your business is moving doesn't mean your workers are necessarily happy, or that they don't think there's things that can be improved. And sometimes, some people can be seen as, aggressive when they don't mean to be. And I talk about like neurodivergent folks that try to bring up very good points, but sometimes they don't. They go about it. I don't say the wrong way, but more too direct of a way. And so it's good to keep open-minded about how people are communicating to you, what they're sharing, and if they are sharing some ideas that, even though you may not think they're that great, why don't you make sure you're writing them down and then sharing them with your the higher managers up there, so that they can decide on it. And then keep that person informed too about their ideas. It's like, maybe it may not, you may not feel it's as valuable, but to them it's the world. And I think that's something that, being able to communicate back to them, especially if you're hosting regular touch bases with them, to make sure that their ideas are being understood and felt. And that will help you know for sure if they're just saying okay all the time. That might be a red flag right there on all members of your team if they're just not bringing forth ideas. They may have ideas, but they're not willing to do it, so they may not feel psychologically safe.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's a huge thing, and I think that's like the first step to making sure that you're getting the right communication, so you know what's going on in your company. But also doing there's reports that you can do for your metrics to kind of see what if your turnover rate is skyrocketing. You see like you're spending more money on bringing people on and getting them trained versus them actually staying. Are you is it taking too long to find roles to get filled? Do you feel like you're canceling roles before actually finding the person to help with the workload because the project's already completed now? I mean, there's a lot of things kind of go into it, but anything that's causing like headaches for people, that there are conversations that you can be looking at, and there are reports you can be looking at, and both are very important information to kind of like prepare when you're going into a new quarter two or the beginning of the cycle all over again in January. That's how being able to know all that stuff and being I think that's how people can prepare. And if they're not sure in general, it's like that again, that's where my little AI assessment thing kind of comes up, where it'll ask some very important questions you may not have thought of, and then it'll let you know if you follow it all the way through, it'll let you know the results. And to be honest, it gives different results all the time because every answer is a little bit different.
Yeah, and absolutely.
It goes into a deep dive into frameworks as far as like what companies are seeing. So definitely highly recommend if you're not sure about if you don't have an HR person that's familiar with workforce planning or workforce audits, then something like that would be a good way to kind of get a good feel for what your company looks like. And then, if you feel like you need the extra help, like an outside pair of eyes to come in and look at things, that's where someone like me comes in.
Exactly. Well, Joel, I want to say thank you for being on the podcast. You guys heard it right there. If your hiring process feels messy or your team keeps cycling through the same frustrations, you definitely want to connect with Joel. Schwan Stratifyr. We'll make sure all the show notes are in there. If you want to continue to build on that, what Joel's doing and work on improving the communication and helping your people make sure that these processes work, of course, reach out to me too at Steward Your Business. Joel and I work together. We want to integrate what we're doing to help you holistically. And so that, you have teaming partners, you have people that come alongside you. That's why we have the whole Business Roundtable podcast, so that you're hearing from these experts in the field that really want to help you succeed in your business, whether you're the owner or you're the team lead. We're here for you. We love to have your feedback, your welcomed reviews. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, whatever the case might be. Thank you for being here. We want you to come back. Thank you, Joel, for joining us on the podcast. It was a real pleasure having you today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Until next time, be well.